being here for me is being home in a sense, because French is territory to me in many ways. One of my companies, Sokwa Chair Center, is a joint venture with the largest French manufacturer of office seating, Sokwa SA France. They're in Ndaye, in the south of France. And we've been partners for about 18, 19 years. And we were their dealer in Nigeria for about 10 years. And then we decided to build a factory here together. And we did that about 18 years ago in response to a government policy. I also had the privilege to be part of President Macron's club that is set up of Nigerians and French people to work together in terms of how we can increase the economic flow between Nigeria and France. And I know that in many ways, there's a lot that we can do on both sides, and I can see my colleague on the board here. We were both together in that club project. And this morning, and Franco-Nigeria, as a French-Nigerian company, we were heavily involved for quite a long while. Now, my assignment this morning is to talk about women as the real architect of enterprise growth. And I cannot do that without sort of going back to a traditional history. I was raised by my grandmother, so I'm a bit of an old woman in my brain, in how I think, as my friends say. But in many ways, it's also to look at how the economic infrastructure of Nigeria was traditionally. The men had the tendency to marry many wives, but when you actually find out why, it's because they needed manpower for their businesses, for their farms especially. So they needed many wives and many children so they can create an army of their workforce. And what happened? The men and the women and the children work the farms, but who sells the products? It's the women. Because the produce then goes to the market on the market day, and generally it's the women who are at the market selling the goods. So when you think about the fact that for all times, the women of our continent have been actively engaged in the economic process, but as an underpaid, undervalued partnership, then you realize that at a time when the development of the economic sector became a lot more formal, as women were getting into paid employment or becoming business people themselves, the traditional mindset that set the woman at a disadvantage didn't shift fast enough to recognize the real value and the potential that the women brought to the workplace. And that's the battle that we're still fighting, trying to change. Now, there are two wars that we're fighting. It's the war of creating a society and an environment that then begins to understand that it's not smart business move to disadvantage 50% of your asset. Because our population, women are 50% of our population. And it doesn't matter how efficient and productive you are. If you're only using 50% of your resources, your growth is already capped. You've maximized your limit. Now, unleashing the other 50% of your asset in all its glory will be what I, as a business person, or any other business person in this room, will consider a normal action. Because that will be the smart thing to do. I always say it's like flying a plane that has a twin engine, and you decide that permanently you're just going to fly with one engine. Or better still, as an athlete, if you want to run, and I used to be fast, they used to call me the rabbit. Imagine getting ready in 100 meters dash, and you tie one hand behind your back and one leg tied up. What will you be doing? You'll be hopping. The guys who are serious about using two hands and two legs will be long gone. They will be home for dinner by the time you get to the end of the race hopping. In stark reality, this is what we do when we undermine the capacity for women to fully participate. Now, the other part of the battle, I said there are two parts, is us as women. because I've had the privilege and the opportunity to engage and to work aggressively. And it's part of why it's become like a day job for me about how to ensure that that other 50% understands his own power, has the right knowledge, and is set free to pursue the opportunity. Now, I have no problem with you wanting to be a housewife because it's a choice. And a woman who makes that choice must know how she wants to be successful as one. And that's fair. But my commitment is, how do you get the other ones who think differently about how they want to spend their time, who are ambitious and driven to do something else other than that? How do you make sure that they have every tool that they need to be part of the system that delivers economic? It's a business issue. It's not a gender issue. When 21 years ago, myself and my colleagues, who are all founders of Wimbase, decided we wanted to do this, we were in our 30s. The oldest ones amongst us were in their early 40s. At that point, nobody gave us any chance that we could build anything, because the same traditional mindset, oh, women, all these ambitious women, successful in their own individual right, even at that level, they were sure we were going to fight each other and nothing will happen. But we made certain clear decisions. If 5 people turn up for a meeting, if they make a decision, it's binding on all of us. And we were never going to make any of such statements true. So even if you're mad at somebody else, you're going to have to eat the humble pie, because the task we had was bigger than us. And I'm glad to see that 21 years after, we had the courage to totally disappear from the operation as if we were not part of it. Our work is done. The institution is built. The new chairman is there. We set up a board, and the work has continued. I think your last conference, you had 2,300 women physically in the house and about 600 or so virtually connected. Why? Because it was important to create the infrastructure that gave women the liberty to know that whatever they wanted to do, they could. It was about them having the choice to make that decision to go or not, and that we can respect. On my plane in on Tuesday, there was a young, smart, brilliant, if I say her name, everybody here will know, brilliant young Nigerian woman creating amazing company, doing amazing things. She was on the flight. So she came to talk to me at a point, and she was talking about how she was worried about taking up a board position in Nigeria because of all the kind of troubles that can come. And I smiled and I said to her, you cannot be. Now, we didn't pay the price for others to run away. Listen to me. It's when you want to take territory, there will be war. When you want changes to happen, people don't give you territory. You take it, and in taking territory, there's always a battle. And the battle is meant to scare and to intimidate. But what you must know is you have the right to. If you don't, we cannot achieve the changes. You will sometimes find the friendly President Macrons who are gender friendly, who will make the right move and hopefully sustain it, because that depends on who comes after or how the law is structured. But it isn't even about the presidential mandate. It's about what happens in each boardroom and in each company, and about every woman who sits in a place who then uses that opportunity to create the infrastructure for the change. As the first female, when I became the chairman of First Bank, it was at the 122-year point. 122 years of a company, and women didn't show up. When I joined the board, there was one female ED. And shortly after, one other female non-executive director came. So we became 3 at a point. And then somewhere along the line, the female ED left, the female NED left. And then you find yourself in a large board. So you also have wisdom, but you must have power to do things. See, the other thing is you must have the courage to use the power that you have to build infrastructure for the change. Well, I did work my own process over the time that I was there to find smart women you could not question their ability to deliver, to serve on the board. And by the time we were leaving, if you understand the board of the bank, the chairman of the board credit committee was female, the chairman of governance was female, the chairman of risk was female. When I became chair, we had the first company secretary in 120-something years, female. First. How? I mean, you know, company secretary is like one of those domains that is ceded to women. In most companies, at least on a board, if there's no other woman, the company secretary is female. In First Bank, we didn't have one. When I asked for a change of company secretary, and they asked me if I had a candidate, if I had anyone in particular that I would like to interview for, I said yes. The person who served as company secretary for me when I was chairman of FBN Quest, she's qualified, she's competent, and she should be interviewed along with everybody else. And obviously, at the end of the day, she was my choice. So that's how we got our first female company secretary. The reality is, there is an infrastructure that makes it difficult for you to move the women up. But there's also the mind infrastructure of the women that makes them give up their spaces halfway through. Half my battle was with the girls, the few girls who were in range to fight for to move up, who then get upset with one thing or the other. Life is a battle. You don't run. You fight. I know I want to resign, but to go to where? Because where you're going to, there will be no battles. And you know, did I have days when I didn't think this work is madness? I should just go home and be happy. I can eat if I didn't do the work. So it was not the incentive. But then I remember it took 122 years for me to show up. I represented every other woman's hope. I remember after I was appointed how many elderly women would stop me at functions, at the airport, somewhere. Just stop you. Yeah, Ibukun, Awosika, aren't you? And I'm, yes, ma. And they hug you so tightly, you could feel their unspoken words. And then they would say, I'm so proud of you. And I know it wasn't about me. It was simply that they're proud to find a woman there. For them, it meant something. I don't know what they went through to make those statements. So, you're the architects of the change that we seek in every place and every space that you occupy, by the things you do, by how you do it. I'll tell you another story. There's one of the MDs of the banks right now who is female. Because if you notice, all of a sudden we had 9 female MDs emerge. It was after the 3 female chairmen of banks. This person was acting literally like number 2, supporting the institution to keep going. And when there was a need for change, they were about to look over her again and go and look out. And this other female, who had influence in the circle of the person who had to make the decision, said to the person, you admired this woman, this woman, this woman. He said, yes, very smart girls. They're doing great jobs. He said, so why do you think you can admire them except that somebody gave them the opportunity to show you what they could do in those offices? Why can't you give this girl the opportunity to show you what she can do as well? Because I'm sure she'll do a good job. And then he sat back and looked at the situation differently. And that's how this smart woman, qualified woman, got the job she was more than qualified for. In facilitating change, we're going to have to be voices at home and voices at work. Sometimes your spouses or influencers of men who have power, but you don't use it for the cause. So now, I will never fight for a woman who isn't qualified for the job, because we do more damage when we do. For every woman who is incompetent and shows up and messes up, we make it more difficult for 100 other women. So I don't believe in that. That's not my female mantra. But I want to ensure that every woman that has the capacity is prepared. It's why I started the Dubai conference. It's because I realized a lot of women are technically competent. They're ambitious, they want to be there, but there's stuff they will never know except they've sat in certain places that will undermine their ability to get into those places and do it successfully. So it was a deliberate move to strategically create a space to add the missing gaps for women who want to be. And two, to create a power block. Because women hold power, but they don't realize their own power. Why? Because women hold their power in silos, in small, small pockets of power. Totally disconnected power. Yet, if the women were smart enough, which is what the men do well, to connect the power to create a superpower, you'll be the superpower that will support every woman to succeed. And then she will not feel so alone, isolated, without a support block, which makes her more vulnerable and easier to deal with. There's combined self-interest in the way that men move. Even when they know this to be true or wrong, they can't speak up because in allowing the combined interest to serve them, they have to protect the combined interest. So women, there are things you have to learn. I'm a student of life. I like to learn from everything around me. What do you learn from the way men operate? What do you learn from the way children operate? What do you learn from the way your staff at home, your cook, your house girl? So everybody has something to teach you. That's my approach to life. And the third leg of why we hold the International Women Leadership Conference is women don't learn to enjoy their lives. We're busy taking care of everything and everybody else. Then when you get to 60 or 70 and you think you've retired, you're trying to then have fun. And you're too tired to have the fun. So we decided that, okay, there will be 3 pillars. The knowledge which is required, the power which is the connectivity, and fun, learning to enjoy your life. Because if what you do is fun for you enough, you will fight for it. So what is my challenge to us today? We can create the change that we need. We can, and it is not just for gender interests. It is for the economic interest and the success of our countries and our companies. The truth is, the kind of decisions that are made at male-only tables, they're so substantially different from the decisions that are made from a gender-balanced table. That is the truth. The sensitivities and the sense of community and the value-based approach that women bring to a table, men can discount because they're more transactional by nature. And the most successful organizations are the ones that have the wisdom to take value from both gender. One of my favorite boards is my Cadbury board. Incidentally, we're about to be more women than men. It wasn't, we didn't seek, well, let's not tell. Anyway, we're about to be more women than men. I've been on that board for 11 years now, and I know that, you know, we at a point we had to say, this girl is qualified to be MD. Why do we keep bringing people in and out, in and out, in and out? Put a plan behind it. What's the gap? Work with it. Fill the gaps. And it's been an amazing result to have the first female CEO of a multinational that's been in Nigeria for how long? And who buys FMCG food products? Who buys Bonvita? 80% of the buyers, decision makers for the family, they're women. So imagine sitting at an all-male table discussing how to sell products that families use, that women buy, if there are no women there. Just simple, ordinary things will create blind spots. And you will make the wrong decision unintentionally, simply because you do not have the right table. So it's not a gender issue, it's a business issue. And when nations have men and women considering the issues, how do you make healthcare issues that has to do with a woman's reproductive system if there are not enough women at the table to explain to you what it means to have a period? Or what childbirth feels like? Because I haven't seen one man that's had one before. It's real. When you're talking about kitchen table issues, okay, market, cost of food, and everything, matters that can translate to political impact. Men have no clue how many women subsidize the money they give them for housekeeping. So frankly, you could go and make an argument ill-informed simply because you don't have the right information. What is my challenge to you today? That you understand that if you sit in this room, you are privileged. If you sit in this room, you have power to create change. If you sit in this room today, you're an influencer. What are you using your power, your influence, and your voice to do? For what will be the benefit for our entire community, for you and I, for your children? Because if we build a better community, then we all prosper. And if you have daughters, even if you're men in the house, I'm not talking about strange women. I'm talking about your wives, your daughters, your nieces, your sisters, the women you love in your household. That's your little niece, you like to rub her head. Her future is dependent on the kind of environment that you create. I have watched girls that parents invested so much in, send them to the best schools in the world, smart, brilliant girls, chemical engineering, this one, that one, and then they marry some young man who only has the traditional view of things. And in a short while, in fact, I can never forget one day, I don't know what I was doing, one of those programs at Terra Culture. And there's this young girl there, she had a baby and all of that. And she got up. She wanted to ask a question, but she ended up crying and crying and crying to calm her down for her to ask her question. Smart, brilliant, studied whether it was chemical engineering or something, went to school in England, now got married, was working when she met the guy, married the guy, and then, somewhere 2-3 years, she's pregnant, she's had a baby, and they're struggling in terms of baby and settling down and all, and the guy goes, maybe she just resigned. I've listened to that too many times. I've watched across multiple organizations, young women who want to be, feel they have no choice but to give up. There's no worse woman than a woman that is internally frustrated and unhappy. One day she's going to kill you if you don't realize it. Because every time she sees her friends that she's smarter than at school, be somebody, she'll remember what you stole from her. But that's somebody's daughter. Because the girl told me her father called her one day and said, I educated you so you can have a life. Her real question was about the conflict of interest between what her father was saying and what her husband wanted from her. And what was she going to do? She cried and cried and cried. I can multiply that by 1,000 times that I've spoken to young women. There's a program I run that is called the Life Series. Some people ask me, why do you spend so much time doing these things? Because there's a national crisis. And I realize, you know what? If you don't find a way to deal with this situation, I'm a firm believer in whatever I see to be wrong, and I understand what can be done. I don't care if I start with just one person. I start and continue to build on it. That's like the program he was talking about. Because I decided we had a crisis of employability in the country. And started the After-School Graduate Development Center and started running programs just to help young people to understand that there are jobs available, but this is the way it can be done. And then train them, help them to go and get things done and reset lives. For me, it's a joy and a privilege to meet him here today. And I run into them everywhere, at airports and places. Oh, I was on this, your program, I was on that. That's what makes it worth it. It's really who we are. We're community builders as women. We change lives. We change communities. We have to fight battles. But you know what? If we create the right community and tribe, the days we need to fight for the causes that we believe will change our country and our community, we will not fight alone. We will stand up. We will not be afraid to fight for the right things. We will not be afraid to speak the truth, even when sometimes it will cost us, because the reverse is costlier. If all we do is comply by being quiet, if all we do is comply by accepting what is wrong as right, even when we know that we will pay a price to do what we know is right to do. But what I teach the young people is, before you get to the moments of the battle, watch your trail of life. Make sure that you're building a trail that can defend you when you get to the moments. Make sure you're leaving a legacy of right thinking, right actions, of values, of your truth, of your integrity, of your character, so that the moment you face the storm, there is enough substance of your track record, of your truth, that will rise and speak. That's what saved me from many battles. That's why I can move on without looking back. And you must be clear about what you're fighting for. I'm not challenging you to just fight for the next woman that you don't know. But remember, that next woman someday will be your daughter or your granddaughter. I only have 3 sons, so I have no daughters, so to speak, to fight. But I have many daughters that I didn't give birth to. And God knows if all my boys will be girls, then it will be the life of my granddaughters at stake. Can we build the right infrastructure for economic and societal growth in the right direction, in the way that we want it? More than anybody else, we as women, because we feel it. See, the battles you fight, there's no battle you can fight more than the ones you fight from your passion and your emotion. Like the one you fight because you feel it. When you fight a fight of justice, there's a way you fight it. Because you know the consequence of not. If I remember one incident, there was a particular young man who had competed for something when I was still chair of the bank. I think we were choosing a country CEO for one of the countries. And somehow, the kind of battles that always get me in trouble, but which I never apologize for. But somehow, even though he was the lead in the process, there was a plan that he shouldn't be the one to go. But accident of faith, which is the kind of difference that women make. When my office was contacted for me to have that last point of communication with the person that was supposed to be going, they somehow accidentally gave the right person who won in the process to my staff. So that's who they set up an appointment for me to see. And this young man came to see me, sat down, had a chat with him, asked him all the questions, and when we were done, I found him more than suitable. Typical motherly instinct. Prayed with him and blessed him to go. And then maybe about 2 weeks after or so, someone comes to me and says, "Sorry, Chair, that's not the person that's supposed to go. There was a mistake." I'm like, "How?" I got all the paperwork. I saw all the assessment. That's the guy that was at the top of the table. And that's the guy you guys gave to my office. They said, but when we considered other things, we wanted this other guy to go. I said, well, it's too late. You can't change it. Sorry. I've spoken to the guy. I find him suitable. And if he was the top of your process, I've already told him, I've given him my word that he's blessed to go. You're not reversing it. End of story. And so the guy went there and succeeded doing the job. Look, to change our country and change our societies and change the companies and organizations where we will find ourselves, we need courage. And trust me, women have more courage than they realize. It takes courage to go through childbirth and not give up after the first one. It takes courage to believe a guy say, "I love you," and you actually think that he does. It's true. It's just somebody's word, and you dare to accept that I can give my entire life, including my father's name, away on his word. That's courage. and trust. And even though there are hundreds of millions of betrayal of that trust and failure of that courage, yet there will be another girl that will say, I do today. And one that would accept some ring tomorrow in a proposal. Why? Because we have the courage to believe and to love. To create the real change that we need in order to achieve the kind of growth that we need in our communities. We need that courage that women use for the ordinary things. The courage that makes a woman that's never flown before in her life fly at the sight of a car about to hit her child. You need that kind of courage to accept the challenge that if we really want things to work and we're not paying lip service, we have to do real work and we must take on the responsibility. It cannot be a few of us. It's got to be all of us. Why? Because when it's all of us working together to create that change, we're stronger and more powerful and more able to save our companies and our countries from what happens when you run a twin engine plane with one. The infrastructure is needed, and we're a major tool of making it happen. Thank you.